Hello, I'm Cris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. Most of you will be familiar with Reader's Digest, the small magazine that contains condensed articles and stories. My parents subscribed to the magazine when I was growing up, and I would often thumb through it. One article that always caught my attention was entitled, "The Most Unforgettable Character I Ever Met." Without fail, this article always told a great story about someone who had impacted the life of the writer. Well, on tonight's show, we're going to take a look back at some of the people we've met during the past 6 seasons. Here are some of my most unforgettable characters. I first met Bunny Lee Wilhelm at the regular Friday night meeting of the Memphis Bop Club. She wasn't hard to spot on the dance floor that night. As I found out later, Bunny Lee has been dancing, in one way or another, throughout her life. She started as a go-go dancer at the old Nightlighter Club and has danced her way through a series of occupations ranging from court clerk to burlesque performer. Today, she teaches yoga at various places around town, including the McWhirter Senior Center. As you watch Bunny Lee bend her body into various pretzel shapes, realize that she's in her 80s. She definitely doesn't act her age.
It's been easy for me to laugh this lifetime. You program your life. You make choices with every thought you think and every word you say and every emotion you have. That's how powerful you are.
Here's another guy that doesn't act his age. Dale Sanders is also in his 80s, but he's always looking for the next adventure. In the Navy, he was a hard hat diver, a notoriously dangerous assignment. In the 60s, he was a champion spear fisherman and once held the record for underwater breath holding at just over 6 minutes. In 2015, Dale set out in a specially rigged canoe in an attempt to become the oldest person to paddle the entire length of the Mississippi River, from the source in Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico, a distance of over 2,300 miles.
Kind of difficult paddling now in this wind and rain. Look here, we all decked out. I'm the only one on the water really right now. This is what it looks like.
After 80 days of paddling, Dale completed his journey. As I write this, he's hiking the Appalachian Trail, attempting to become the oldest person to complete the 2,200-mile journey. Now you know why his nickname is the Graybeard Adventurer.
I know that more I exercise and the more I participate, especially outdoor activities, the happier I am. I'm speaking to the generation before me, 50s and 60s. Those people, if they prepare themselves now, like I did, they will be and they can be doing the same things I'm doing now at 80 and 81.
Retirement means different things to different people. Phil and Cheryl Gaston embarked on their retirement adventure by selling their 3,500 square foot home outside of Atlanta and moving into a 350 square foot RV. Their nomadic lifestyle has led them from the Badlands of South Dakota to the top of Pikes Peak in Colorado. When I left them, they were planning to visit the Grand Canyon and then drive up the scenic Pacific coastline on California 1. They plan on continuing their retirement adventure for as long as they can.
People wait till they retire to do anything, and then they might not make it to retirement. So I just said, let's do it. Let's sell everything.
It was really a chance to live for us.
Exactly.
I mean, because we were literally living to work.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was, we looked at it as a chance to go live.
While Phil and Cheryl are on a permanent road trip, Ralph and Twyla Williams decided to pull up stakes and move to a new home 8,000 miles away in Tanzania. They are following in the footsteps of their missionary parents by becoming Christian missionaries to the drought-afflicted Maasai people. And they go there as teachers, teaching the Maasai how to build water cisterns and biosand water filters from readily available materials, teaching them to read, and showing them how they can establish their own businesses. They hope that their efforts can make a difference in the lives of the Maasai.
If we can establish a group of people who are teaching their neighbors how to read and write and make their life better that way, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. If we can show people how to create a business and they're making a living and showing somebody else how to make a living, we've really accomplished what we're there for.
I've met a number of people who are devoted to a mission in their lives. Reverend Lisa Anderson is a Disciples of Christ minister who started a program called Room in the Inn. Every winter, from November through March, churches open their doors to the city's homeless. Members of congregations from across the area cook and serve hot meals and provide warm beds for the night. On any given night in the winter, there may be upwards of 2,000 homeless people on our streets. Reverend Anderson taught me a lot about who the homeless really are and why we should open our doors and our hearts to them.
Almost every time I speak to someone who's new to what we're doing, they'll say that. Well, there are some people who just want to be homeless. And I think there are some people who have given up the idea that there's any other way to be, but I'm not sure that there's anybody I've met that wants to live on the street. There has been some beauty in opening up what we call a sanctuary to people who need sanctuary, and that's such a beautiful concept.
When I met Reverend Jack Conrad, he was making the rounds of cancer patients at Methodist Hospital, Germantown. He spent 35 years as a corporate executive in the manufacturing industry, making railroad parts. And then a chain of events led him to a second career as a chaplain. The wisdom he gained from reinventing his life can serve as a lesson to anyone who's arrived at one of life's crossroads.
Every last one of us, looking at our particular status, will think that if we had more, we'd be better off, and that's just not true. Who we are makes a much more difference than what we think we have. It's not security against death. It's not security that life is going to be fair. It just isn't. But if we're secure in who we are, and we can imagine ourselves doing different things, oh Lord, what a great place this would be.
Brigadier Gertrude Perdue is the oldest person I've interviewed on the show. She had just turned 100 when I spoke with her about her 80 years of service in the Salvation Army. Gertrude called herself a handmaiden of God. Perhaps we can all learn from her advice.
Enjoy life. Even in this changing world, don't get discouraged about it. Just go with the flow. Go with the change. Take it because it comes, and make the best. Not only make the best, but try to make it better.
Bob Sauter isn't an ordained minister, but he is as devoted to his ministry as any preacher of the gospel. In 2007, Bob and his wife took their retirement money and bought this small house at the busy corner of Summer and Highland. This is Forgiveness House. In legal terms, it's a residential reentry center, more commonly called a halfway house. 12 men paroled from prison live here for a minimum of 90 days as they try to rebuild their lives. Bob and his staff operate on a shoestring budget to provide guidance and help to men who are often shunned by society.
Again, the Bible clearly states in 2 places that in order to be forgiven, we must forgive. And I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but forgiveness must happen either before or after. And while these men cannot probably face, many of them, face their victims, again, from a spiritual point of view, the Lord will equalize that situation. They will be able to go back out into the community and help somebody else that's been damaged. And in that restoration will be helpful not only to that person, but also to our guys that are out there, you know, trying to make a difference in somebody else's life.
Diane Height is dedicated to a different group, the men and women who serve this nation in our military. This is a regular meeting of the group she founded, Forever Young. Diane's idea was to grant the wishes of war veterans, specifically the members of the greatest generation that fought in World War II. She's raised money to take veterans on trips to the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., and has brought veterans back to their battlefields, from D-Day on Utah Beach to the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. And by doing so, she's given closure to 70-year-old wounds.
I like to say, as you throw a stone into a pond and you just see the ripple effect, that's exactly what happens with Forever Young. You'll see it in the healing in the lives of our veterans, and then it just trickles out to the family members and to the community, and it just goes on and on and on.
I've interviewed many war veterans for the show, but Olin Pickens may have the most remarkable story. Olin landed in North Africa in January of 1943 as a raw private. During the Battle of Faid Pass, he was captured by the Germans, force-marched to the coast, and transported by ship, train, and truck to Stalag 3B in Germany. There he worked construction with picks and shovels from sunup to sundown. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. After a year of imprisonment, Olin and a buddy managed to escape. They were within hours of connecting with the French underground and crossing to a neutral country when they were recaptured. Their punishment was solitary confinement.
He put each one of us in some little dungeons made out of concrete. While I was in that dungeon, as I was telling you about over there, I wasn't in there by myself. Jesus was in there with me. Because every once in a while I'd think about, well, I'm just going to give up and die. It's just easy to die. It was hard to live. I mean, it took effort to keep living, but it was, if you just sit down, you just die real easy. So when I'd think about that, I'd hear this voice, "What did you tell your mother and daddy when you left home?" I thought, well, I told them that I'd be back when the war is over. And so when I thought that in my mind, it just gave me new strength. I didn't think about giving up and dying anymore. So actually my faith brought me home.
Olin Pickens was liberated in April of 1945. When he was captured, he weighed 195 pounds. When he was liberated, he weighed just 120 pounds. Gerald Jacobson, or Jake, is a veteran of 2 wars, Korea and Vietnam. He flew combat missions over North Korea as a radar operator aboard a Douglas Sky Raider. In 1965, he was the commander of a helicopter medevac unit in Vietnam. That's when he flew a mission to evacuate wounded Vietnamese civilians from a village. It's a mission that haunted his dreams.
I had a woman fall out of my helicopter. Helicopter can carry so many pounds, and that's it. And we had loaded up, and it was strictly a load of Vietnamese wounded. And she was trying to get on the helo, and I spoke Vietnamese at the time, and I said, no, in Vietnamese, I said, you can't go, we're too heavy, I'll never get this helo off the ground. And I pushed her off, and I had my co-pilot get us aloft. And we got up about 1,000 feet, and one of my crewmen said, Commander, there's a woman hanging out. Excuse me. There's a woman hanging on the skids. God. It was her. I went back there and I grabbed her hand, she grabbed my hand, and she let go.
And I watched her cartwheel all the way to the ground. And it was about that time that her husband, who was on the helo, died. And I want to go back and find out where she fell.
For his actions in Vietnam, Commander Jacobson was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. I've met a few of my most unforgettable characters at WKNO. Joe Wood was a regular volunteer at the station during our pledge drives and auctions. In fact, Joe was a volunteer at arts organizations throughout the city. That's how she filled her calendar and kept busy after her retirement and the death of her husband. She loved to show theater patrons to their seats and then sit and enjoy the performance herself. Joe passed away a few years ago, but her volunteer legacy lives on.
Get out and be active. Don't sit and just, if you sit at home, everything goes bad for you. You lose all your muscles and everything and all. And last year when I had my checkup, my doctor says, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep doing it. There's always some place that you can volunteer in the city of Memphis.
Chuck Scruggs spent his life behind a microphone. His radio career took him from Cincinnati to San Francisco before becoming the general manager at WDIA in Memphis. When he left radio broadcasting, he began to volunteer at WKNO. So when the station was looking for someone to be the face and voice of their new children's programming, they didn't have to look very far. Chuck Scruggs became Mr. Chuck and began an encore career preparing preschoolers and their parents to enter school ready to learn.
But I've seen too many lives that are hanging in the balance, they have no hope themselves, and there doesn't seem to be enough hopeful sense centered around them through the people who could affect their lives positively. If you care enough, you don't have to care too deeply. If you're sensitive enough, you have to be moved by that in some way. So I'm just doing what I can.
Chuck Scruggs is no longer with us, but his legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of the children he impacted. I've done more pledge breaks with Jim Eichner at my side than I can count. He was synonymous with WKNO. A few years ago, I did a story about his creative side. When he wasn't acting in theatrical productions around town, Jim was painting. He studied watercolor with Fred Rawlinson, and painting made Jim see the world around him in a different way.
I think that's one of the only ways you can really feed your spirit with stuff that you can do. There's such excitement. I have a little mantra that I repeat most mornings that is an acronym, GLAD. To wake up grateful, to find some way that day to love, to show love, to treat life like an adventure, the GLAD, and the fourth is the most difficult for me, and that's discipline. You do all this, but you gotta have some discipline with it. And this motivates me and keeps me going, and it's exciting to say there is no acceptable alternative to viewing this day as an adventure.
Unfortunately, Jim passed away not too long ago, but his legacy at this station lives on. In 2005, Merrill Klein started an organization called Creative Aging. The concept was simple: bring music and the arts into senior communities throughout the area. To date, Creative Aging has presented over 6,000 performances for over 30,000 residents of nursing homes and care facilities. And for seniors who are still living independently, they offer the Senior Art Series at Theater Memphis. Merrill believes that art can change lives at any age.
The soul of Memphis is music. And these people who have grown up here or have lived here for decades, they feel that and they respond to it.
In 1963, Deanie Parker recorded a song she wrote called My Imaginary Guy, which became a regional hit. She went on to become Stax Records' first head of publicity and artist relations. The Memphis sound came out of this studio, and Deanie was there for its rise and fall. But from the ashes of Stax Records has risen Soulsville, USA, and Deanie was one of its creators and its CEO until her retirement. For her, the music lives on.
I will feel that I have left my legacy when out of the Stax Music Academy, the next greatest artist is discovered and launched, so that the world will once again look at Memphis and Soulsville, USA, and the corner of College and McLemore and say, yeah, they still got it going on.
Everyone likes a good love story. Well, this one proves that romance is ageless. Joy Jamison and Sam Nichols were high school sweethearts, but World War II took Sam halfway across the world, and they lost contact with one another. For nearly 60 years, they led separate lives. Each thought the other had died, and that would have been the end of their story, except for Sam's sister Millie and email.
About a month later, the phone rang early in the morning, and this female voice said, "Joy, this is a voice from the past." I said, "Oh, who is this?" And she said, "This is Millie Gustafson. I'm Sam's Nichols' little sister." And I said, "Oh, what happened to Sam?" And she said, "Oh, he's living out in Arizona." And I just about flipped. I couldn't believe it. We began emailing each other. And that, to me, is the beauty of our story, because we could go into depths, not only just to find out what had happened in the last 50 years, but we exchanged ideas and our philosophy of life and what was important to us. And that, to me, is what made our love such a deep one, because it was a few months later that he finally came to see me, and we were like teenagers again. When we saw each other, it was, I don't know, the old magic was just still there. Nothing had ever changed, really, even though it was a long time after.
In 2001, after a lifetime apart, Joy and Sam were married. Last but not least on my list of unforgettable characters is Lester Gingold. After 2 careers, Lester was on his way to retirement when, at age 72, he became the editor and publisher of the Best Times newspaper. For the next 20 years, Lester threw himself into learning everything he could about gerontology. He wrote editorials about aging issues and attended national aging conferences. This show was his brainchild. In his encore career, as he called it, Lester was determined to make a difference. Today, at age 95, he is finally retired, almost. After a lifetime of stories and a legacy of helping others, Lester has a philosophy of life that serves as wisdom for us all.
You're never too old to learn. You're never too old to love. You're never too old to pray. I do more of these every day. That's it.
Want more information about life after 50? Go online to watch more shows and find more resources. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Cris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night.